So if we're going to talk about anger, we got to begin with love first, right? Because otherwise it's going to feel off balance. So you might not get the connection, but we're going to talk about, I love these stats, these facts. So how long ago was 1,000 seconds? It was 16 minutes and 40 seconds. So how long ago was 1 million seconds? 1 million seconds was 11 and a half days ago. So it goes from 16 minutes to 11 and a half days. How long ago was 1 billion seconds? It's a bit over 31 and a half years. It's a big gap, isn't it? From 11 days to 31 and a half years. And then how long ago was 1 trillion seconds? And that's slightly over 31,688 years. So roughly 24,000 years before the earliest civilization began to take place. That's a trillion. I love those statistics for so many reasons, or those measurements, because often when we talk about we're surrounded by this vastness of love that almost has no meaning, or infinite love, like, well, okay, that's nice, infinite love. But let's just look at infinite love as like trillions of seconds. That's a lot. That's a lot of love. And that love, trillions and trillions, so 1 trillion, just 1 trillion seconds is 31,688 years. You are surrounded by trillions and trillions of seconds of love right now. That all of that love of time and space beyond what we can even imagine, and yet even when we have measurements, it's hard to believe. That's at the center of your heart right now. Isn't that amazing to know that we're swimming in just this incredible, vital, active love all of the time, and that we are made in the image and likeness of that love, right? We're vibrating this love. And then when we look at our human love, I would say our human love is more like the 1,000 seconds or the million seconds. It's good, it's really good, and it's love. But it's not nearly as profound as this 1 trillion seconds. And so my feeling is when we really take that in, there's that part of us that knows, even when we don't take it in, we're made in the image and likeness of that love. We were birthed from this love. So there's a part of us that always knows that we are so loved and that we are love itself and that our entire life is created in love, and work and relationships and everything is all aspects of that love. And so sometimes it feels like the anger that we can start to feel is that, well, I don't really actually feel it. And if I'm made in the image and likeness of love, why aren't I feeling it? It's hard to even imagine how negative emotions can even exist when we know that there's trillions and trillions of seconds of love surrounding and folding us in every moment. So sometimes when we talk about something like sadness or depression or fear, those are negative emotions, but they're a little bit passive. They're a little bit like, it's not really going to harm anybody. It's not going to really change the universe. I think anger is probably one of the most difficult emotions because there's this vital force behind it. There is this energy that pours through us. And we know that when anger's on the field, it's going to be messy. And we can get better at dealing with it, but it's still difficult because it's active. It's not going to keep things the same. And so things are going to have to change. I was talking to Julian about anger because I noticed like he loves to get angry before a game. And I was asking him about that. He goes, oh yeah, anger's great. He said, before a game, I just get myself so riled up. And he goes, and I go out and he goes, it gets me totally focused. If I'm out there in a good mood and just playing along, I don't play very well. But when I get angry, I get focused and I'm going to take them down. And he loves it. And he says, I play better, I feel better. It gets any tension out of my body because it's an okay vehicle for it. Anger can focus on what needs to be focused on. It's a vital energy. You know, in Hinduism, I'm sure they have it, the pagan gods, I don't know what they are, but in Hinduism, they have two gods of destruction. It's Shiva is the male god and Kali is the female goddess of destruction. That they see the role that this plays in life. You can't have rebirth if you don't have the destruction of the death of something. So you have to let something go before you let something in, and sometimes that's really hard. We get very attached. We will continue along, and we all know this because I've heard so many people give talks about this over the years, is that we get so comfortable in what's familiar that even though we might not like it anymore, we keep going with it because it's familiar, and it's going to take a push. It's going to take that vitality of push to get us out of that comfort zone. So there's a good in anger. It can benefit us when we listen to it, but it comes out often messy and uncomfortable, and people's feelings get hurt. Now, if you're in a relationship of love, and there's anger that is expressed, I don't know if you've all been in a relationship like this. It's like one person gets angry and, I'll say it this way. So David Data would say, masculine energy tends to be a little bit emotionally, he says, the masculine energy is like the Helen Keller of emotions. I don't see anything, I don't hear anything. And so the feminine energy might say, this is upsetting me, da-da-da. Nothing happens, keeps changing. Then finally it's like, you're not hearing me! And like, oh, really, what? So have you ever been, you can be on the giver or the receiver of that, but in a relationship where someone just suddenly gets that anger, bursts out, but because there's love, it gets shifted and healed fairly easily. The two people can work it out. And so that's when anger, it's uncomfortable and it's messy, but if you have two people committed, it can really benefit because then the changes that need to happen when they might not otherwise have happened if you were just being nice all the time. Now, sometimes there are relationships where you don't need that, and maybe a lot of relationships, but it happens enough in our culture that I think we need to recognize that there can be value in the outburst that makes change. Where it gets difficult is when the couple isn't clear about the love. And so what happens is you have the angry outburst, but it never actually gets healed, and it just stews, and it gets worse. And then the relationship becomes what we call toxic, that there's just a lot of stuff going on underneath that, you might once in a while have these spews of anger, but it doesn't actually ever heal anything or change anything, and you just keep going. And that's either you stay in a toxic relationship, or I was listening to one woman who's talking about her own rage, and she had been in a relationship with a man who she thought was her dream, but over the years she realized he was being really abusive to her, and so she left. And she said, I was just so full of rage. The leaving him didn't cure it. So she said, then I'm doing forgiveness exercises, and I'm working with a shaman, and I'm just trying to and I just can't get rid of the rage. And so she said, I was running, and I was feeling it, and suddenly she said, I just stopped, and she said, I turned around to face my anger, looking anger in the eye. She turned around, and she said, what she heard the anger say to her was, just stop. Stop and listen. If we know everything comes from love, and there's this anger coming forth, as I was listening to all these stories and looking at my own life, it's usually because we're not listening to ourselves. We're getting mad because someone's not listening to us, but in fact, it's often we aren't listening to ourselves, because what she heard, and I'm using her as an example, but this is pretty common. I wasn't in congruence. I was blaming everybody else, and I was angry at everybody else, but I was the one who wasn't in congruence. And she said, I realized you have to hear it, and then you have to make changes. So she had to really make a lot of changes in her life to be congruent with her own values, because she realized she had gotten so out of alignment with herself. When we are at peace with ourselves, anger won't agitate us as much. But when we're not at peace with ourselves, we're the first people we have to look at. Like, why am I angry with myself? And sometimes we know it's the other person. I had a client once, years ago, and we had been working together for about a year. And then one day, they came in, and just for 20 minutes, spewing all this anger at me. And I thought, oh, what's going on with her? Like, I didn't get triggered because I'd done a lot of healing work I knew enough at that point who I was that I knew, and I knew her, that I knew this was about her. So that was one of when we get triggered, it's because it's something that we need to heal. It doesn't mean the external also needs to be healed, don't get me wrong. The externals might need to be changed. But if I'm really triggered and agitated, there's something in me that needs to get healed. And that's love. That's love is saying, you're not hearing me, hear me. Like the times when I've really had to listen to my anger, it's really been this deep, deep, compassionate thing saying, Harriet, you are in pain, listen to yourself. So I want to share a little bit today. You know, it was Mother's Day month, well, Parents' Day, but Mother's Day too. And I've talked a lot about my family and my parents and very grateful for my childhood, but there's also the shadow side. And so the shadow side is my mother was born a vibrant, alive person, and by fourth grade, her teacher was telling her, you're involved in too many activities, pull back. She had a lot of life, and that she wanted to live it. But she also grew up in a very poor family, so that she said, I don't think there was a single book in the house, and so she didn't have a lot of guidance, but she loved singing and dancing. That was her thing, singing and dancing. She liked to do everything, but singing and dancing was the place, the vehicle. She sang at church, she sang in choir, she was in musicals, and eventually, as she was getting older in high school, going to college, her father sat her down and said, look, musical theater is not okay. That's what lower class, it was funny coming from them, but lower class people do, so you can't, I don't want my daughter to be doing musical theater. Squash, you know. But my mom had this other aspect of her personality, which is she was naturally joyful and ebullient, and she wanted to be a good person. She always had this desire to be a good girl, and so she did it. And even though he passed on, transitioned to the other side in her freshman year in college, she still maintained that because she had this commitment to her dad. Like, I want to be a good person, and this isn't something that I should do. So but it comes out. Like when we try to repress it, but it can't. So she got a job at Bethlehem Steel in her summer intern in between college years. And, you know, she almost got fired once because she just decided one day, she got up on the desk and started tap dancing and singing. And they're like, this is inappropriate work, and got in trouble. But you know, you can't keep that down. This part of her personality. So then she started singing in choirs. And when she married my dad, and they were on their second kid, and my dad was a lawyer working towards becoming a partner, and they had very traditional values, right in alignment. He's the head of the family. She's there to support him in his career and the children. But then she also started singing in the Cleveland Orchestra Chorus with Robert Shaw. It was kind of a big deal. There was rehearsals in the evening, and my dad said, no. You know, either that or you have to get a babysitter because I'm not coming home after a full day at work, and he usually came home and continued to work at his office. I'm not doing it. You know, we have to get it. And she just felt completely unsupported. Again, left the choir, didn't do it. But she has this incredible vitality and energy. She can't help herself. So in raising children, she became the capital fund campaigner at our church. She was the president of the PTA, then became the president of the League of Women Voters. Like, she can't help herself. Then they asked her when I was in high school to run for the state school board. And then my dad said again, no, because that means you're in Columbus, which is 2 hours away. I really want you to be at home. No, again. My mom, being an absolutely positive person, naturally, she was mad, but she didn't hold on to it. She's joyful, continues on. And then in her 70s, in her late 70s, suddenly all this anger started pouring out. Her dad, my dad, her husband, had pushed her down, hadn't let her be, and it just, like, I was so surprised at all this anger that started coming out. This authentic voice that had got, and she participated in it. I remember in the 70s, during Gloria Steinem, she was like, oh, that's terrible, women should be home. It's like she bought into that whole idea herself and was fighting for it. So now all of that was breaking apart in her late 70s. And as her daughters, you know, you're just like, the unlived life of a parent. You just see all this stuff that she had in her that she never let herself explore. And so after, hearing her and being compassionate, I said, well, why didn't you fight? Why didn't you get angry and say, this isn't okay, and I need to do my thing? And she said it just never occurred to her that she was still trying to be, because the other part of her is, I'm trying to be a good girl, and I believe in these same values. I should be at home with the kids. I should be the one doing this. So she's a battle within herself. And so often in our anger, we're in a battle with ourself. There's an inner warfare. You want to be both. I want to be this person and I want to be that person, and they don't seem to work. And the culture or the people that I love are saying, you should be this person because that's who I married and that was our agreement. So let's keep this, so everyone, perfectly happy for this part to go off to the side and be repressed. So often our anger is something that we've repressed in ourselves, that we haven't really given voice to. And often we get cultural agreement because we're being the good person and we're fitting in and we're doing all the right things. And it would have made it uncomfortable if she had fought for herself. Suddenly that would have created a little earthquake in our home life, of our very steady, stable home life. But ultimately it did create an earthquake, and my parents did get separated because, and she always said, I married exactly who I wanted to be married, but I just have to break free. There's just something part of me that has to break free. So ultimately it didn't work, that marriage, because she had to find her voice. So the question is there something in you, when you look at any time in your life that you've been angry, that you haven't been listening to, that you care about deeply, that needs to be heard? That needs to be heard, because for me, that's love, again, speaking and saying, I need to be heard. I need to be heard. 1 trillion seconds of love is pouring in your heart right in this moment. It's pouring. It's like such a huge number. It's just infinite, pouring through our heart in every moment. It never stops. It's giving of itself. And so, yeah, there's going to be some anger where it feels like, wow, you're not letting your light shine. You're not letting your being seen by you, first and foremost. Because ultimately, my mom never heard herself. She never gave herself a voice. She wanted other people. When she got angry with my parents, or my dad and her dad, that was legitimate, and she could have been angry, but she also needed to hear herself. I don't think she really had heard herself before that, how much this mattered to her, and that it actually was something that she should fight for. And so this is an interesting thing as we're dealing with in our culture today. We know there's a lot of anger about a lot of different issues. Started naming them. It just goes on and on. And so this is where it starts to get tricky, because there's the anger that's repressed and isn't dealt with. Then there's the anger that is dealt with in a healthy relationship and comes forth. But then there's the anger that is expressed but never healed because it becomes a habit. And so I feel like in our culture, it's becoming a habit. There was an article I just happened to open up this morning. James Cromwell, who was an actor, glued himself to Starbucks. He was protesting something in Starbucks. And I just read the article quickly, and it was interesting. It said some things that just gave me pause to think. And I wasn't just taking it in. And I just happened to look at the comments, and oh my gosh, they were so full of anger and attack and attack and attack again. And I'm like, wow, you just can't say anything today without, there's going to be a response. If you take any type of perspective, if it's a different perspective than someone else, you can be sure they're going to show up and say what their perspective is, and yours is wrong, and blah, blah, blah. And that just becomes almost habitual. And that's when anger becomes incredibly destructive and unhealthy. And if we do not become conscious of it and really listen to what's going on, it can't be healed. I'm not saying this is healthy, but I am saying I have learned from it. I grew up in a community that was racially basically about half black, half white. So we were always dealing with racial issues most of my life. Learned about white privilege and white savior, being the white savior, long before there were terms for it. So I always felt fairly comfortable in this and understanding, and it was all something I talked about a lot with my friends. But I have one friend So, and really got activated again through George Floyd. And I have a friend who is black and just full of anger, not in general, but in this one area. And sometimes it feels a little bit unrelenting to me and a little harsh. And and they say, I'm done forgiving. He said, black people keep forgiving white people, but do you see the changes? Until the changes are happening, I want to see change. And it'd be like saying, Gandhi should get over the fact that England took over India, or Martin Luther King should get over his issues. It's like, just stop being angry. We want people just to hurry up and get over the anger, do your forgiveness work. And the reason why I say that, because I don't often feel uncomfortable with the things that he says, but I still read them. And I go, that's a little extreme maybe. But it was dawning on me that I'm actually seeing things even deeper, like I'm really hearing what he's saying. Like his anger, he's like, he wants to be heard. And I'm like, I thought I really heard it, but suddenly I'm hearing it at a much deeper level. Like someone who's persistent saying, you have to hear me. You're not hearing me. And I suddenly felt like, I wasn't really fully hearing him. And it's not about right or wrong. It's about hearing somebody, really hearing what's going on and the legitimacy of what's going on from their perspective. I was in a pastoral care class in ministerial school, and we had to go off on our little triads, and we can make up issues. And so then we came back to the big class, and there was one group who came back, and the person who was playing the minister practitioner was like, can't deal with it, client still enraged. And this is a classmate, and she came into class still fully enraged. And she's like, I couldn't handle it. She won't quit. She just won't stop with her anger. And so they said, okay, well, we're in a class. Let's all see if anyone who thinks they can be of service to this client. And so around the table, people would talk to her, tell her about principle. So she was mad. The issue was she made the choice to sleep with men for money because she had no money, and she had a child to raise, and she had a roof to put over their head, and she needed food, and she's sorry if people thought this was horrible, and she just was enraged. But I have to do this. That's this rage was coming out. And so people one by one, people would try to talk with her about principle or about love or, the abundance is with you, and nothing touched her. Not a single thing touched that. That rage stayed high level until the person right next to me just started saying, oh my gosh, that sucks. Man, I'm just so sad for you to have a child and to not have the money to pay for him. I can't even imagine how afraid you are. Her energies just started to deplete, just calming down. For the first time, someone heard that rage and that anger, and that's behind all that rage. I just want to be heard. It's love's unique voice, wants to be heard. This particular situation, not anyone else's situation, not how other people handle it, not what the principles are, what's going on for me specifically. And it's not any accident the person who was doing this with her worked on a suicidal hotline. She had the skills to actually to listen to someone's anger. And so as we're in a country where there's so much anger, so we all have our own positions about things, and that's fine. We have our own perspectives. But if someone's really angry about a perspective, maybe if the first place we went to is just to listen, to really hear what they were saying and try to get underneath it. Well, what are you afraid of? What is it? What need of yours is not getting met? Because clearly you're scared. You're alone. I mean, that anger there's fear. If you're in anger, what's going on? And really, really hearing them and not comparing them to other people or how they should be, or here's the ideal and you're just not getting there. Where are you? We meet them like a spiritual tuning fork and meet them and hear them. Even as when we're in those places, we need people to meet us and hear us. Because when other people hear us, then we can hear ourselves. Because sometimes it's hard to hear yourself, but if someone else hears you, then you actually start to feel that understanding. So anger is an incredible gift that's saying, hear your unique voice. We keep talking about being authentic and not like somebody else, but sometimes we just want to fit in. go that comfortable route, but something in us is going to. And so I'm talking about anger, but it doesn't have to be anger. It could just be agitation. It could just be a little frustration, just this feeling like something's off. But that's love. That is love saying, you need to hear something. There's a reason. You're a beautiful, unique being, and you have to be you. You have to be you, because the more and more we are you, ourselves, that frustration and that anxiety and that irritation and that anger starts to dissolve. And we can be present with other people then, because our own healing has happened. And as I was listening to all these people, they all said the same thing, and we're still working on it. You know, I think anger is such an unpleasant emotion. We want to think like, I got it controlled and it's never going to happen again. But it's a constant thing. It's a constant, because we are infinite beings made in infinite love, and we are going to continue to grow, and we're going to continue. So suddenly it may come out, you might feel like you have it handled, and then it comes out of nowhere. I didn't even know that was there. But we work, if we know that we're loved, by trillions and trillions of seconds of love pouring into our heart, into our body, into our soul, a universe that is for us, that is supporting us, that there's nothing actually trying to resist our good, but in fact, this entire trillions and trillions of seconds of love is all for you to become fully you, that everything is saying yes to you becoming you, and that there's nothing against you, there's nothing actually really to fight against. See, the anger feels like there's something to fight against, but that's just a wall or a habit pattern that needs to shift. And when we really get that, the healing happens. And that's the kind of relationships we want to be in, are those healing relationships that can get us to that place of, yeah, right. I get it. And we become more ourselves. So I'll just end the way Julian ends his football games, because I always thought it was so funny, because he loved that anger and that rage. But always after the game, the first thing he did was go to the other team and start chit-chatting away with the other players. And just like when we played Granada, which is their arch rival, and oh my gosh, I heard about it for weeks. But then afterwards, he's just hanging out, talking. He's like, oh, yeah, it's so fun afterwards. You're just hanging out. All that separation, all that feeling of is completely fine, and we just all love each other and have a great time. That's where we get to. If the anger isn't getting us to that place of hanging out with everybody and feeling in love with everybody, we need more work to do, and that's okay. There's no place to judgment. But to do it as consciously as we can, knowing that we are loved, knowing that you are loved. So please, this week, don't forget that you have trillions and trillions of seconds of infinite love pouring through you in every moment, including right now, in this very moment, pouring through every atom and cell of your body, through your emotional body, your mental body, through your work life, through your relationships, through everything that you're doing. Love is pouring into you, and pouring into community, and pouring into this world, into this earth, pouring itself in every moment. It's so beyond what we can ever humanly imagine, and that's what we are walking in every day. And that entire energy of love is for all of us. Let's pray. For everyone's highest good. No one is left out. No one is left out. There is only love. We just welcome in this love into our heart. We welcome this love into our being. We acknowledge that this love has been surrounding and unfolding us our entire life. And it wants to become even more expressed and realized as joy, as creativity, as freedom, as these deep, intimate, healthy, and whole relationships. It wants the highest and best for each and every one of us. Right now, there's nothing that needs to change. There's nothing that needs to be fixed. It is already there. This full oceanic love pouring through and as each of us. And as we feel into this love, we recognize that it is giving itself as a gift to us when we feel a little bit off, when we feel a little bit like sandpaper's rubbing against us, a little irritable, maybe even as much as anger. And knowing that that is actually a blessing to us. It's teaching us something. It's guiding us to become even more loving, to become even more free, to become even more joyful. And the way is through this anger. And so, divine, beloved Mother, Father, God, infinite love, intelligence, we allow your energy to move through us and to heal us, to bring the clarity that anger can give to us. It brings this incredible clarity, and we have the strength and the willingness to take the actions that need to be taken. And we have the willingness to heal that which needs to be healed. We open to feel and to remember that everything in this universe is guiding us back to our wholeness, guiding us back to our always already freedom, our always already joy, our always already love. Everything is serving that here and now. And so as we hold this for ourselves as individuals, we hold this for the people in our hearts who are in our relationships. There may be family members, friends, community members who are needing this wholeness right here and right now. This emotional healing. As we know, there are also people who are needing physical healing, mental healing, spiritual healing. Everything is working for this healing on every level and dimension of our being. Nothing is left out. Nothing is left out. It is all included. And so we hold these beautiful beings whom we love in our heart for all healing to happen, for all separation to be dissolved into the nothingness from which it came. There is only this one love, this one light. And as we hold and know this for our loves and our friends and our family, we hold this for our country and nation and for our planet. One love, one infinite oceanic love, thousands and trillions of seconds of love pouring through every atom and cell of this planet. On every level and dimension of this planet's existence is love. Carrying us on a journey of becoming more and more itself. This earth is becoming more of itself as we listen and we hear the cries and the frustration. Behind it is love. We hear the call of love. Deep calls unto deep, and deep answers deep through us, right here, right now. To God be the glory, to this infinite oceanic love. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. The healing has happened and continues to happen as we continue to answer this call of the depth. In deep abiding peace, in total trust and everlasting joy, we let this word be now as we say together, and so it is.